on opening weekend, on May 25th, 1977, Star Wars changed the world. No one had ever seen anything like it. Let's talk Star Wars. So you know what that means. Roll that iconic theme music. Here's a quick disclaimer. I would have had this video done sooner. However, during the editing process, I lost all my data, so therefore I lost the video that I had been working on, so I had to start from scratch. So this video took twice as long to edit, so I got this done as soon as I could, so I apologize for the long delay. Now, you know what time it is. Thank you for clicking on my video. You didn't have to do that, but I appreciate that you did. Hello, world. I'm Franklin, aka Mr. FLIXTER, and I'm here to talk motion pictures. Mr. In this episode, if I was going to review one movie for the iconic Star Wars franchise, obviously, I'm going to go with the first one.
Oh, I know. You mean episode 1, The Phantom Menace, right?
That's right. Episode 4, A New Hope.
Oh, that was my next guess. Yeah, that's the ticket. Stop looking at me.
So, who in the galaxy hasn't heard of Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope? Even if you've never seen the movie, you probably know the characters, or the Force, or have heard of Jedi, or Darth Vader, or something to do with Star Wars. The story, the characters, the filmmaking, the actors, the special effects, the music, and the cultural impact are astounding.
I suggest you try it again.
But how did it all come to be?
I sense a disturbance in the Force. We better issue a spoiler warning. Balance restored. Nom.
Sci-fi before this was very different. It was things like Planet of the Apes or 2001: A Space Odyssey. They were all about apocalyptic society stories in the aftermath of their self-destruction. I mean, most science fiction at the time only made between $10 to $16 million. Not very inspiring, if you ask me. So, the question remains, Why would this be any different? George Lucas was born in Modesto, California, so I've always had a close personal connection to him because I grew up around the area. In 1963, he attended USC. He won acclaim for his imagination and technical abilities for his first short film entitled THX 1138. After graduating, Lucas teamed up with Francis Ford Coppola to create the film studio American Zoetrope. THX 1138 was his first feature film based on the short film from school. But Warner Brothers' dissatisfaction had them demanding the $300,000 they invested in the film and future projects be returned. Soon after, the company imploded. Lucas has always been passionate about having creative control over his work, not liking the idea of people tampering with it. Lucasfilm Limited was founded in 1971. Taking Coppola up on a dare, he decided to do a simple, silly comedy, which eventually became American Graffiti. Set in Modesto, California in 1962, it was inspired by his life as a car enthusiast and his love for cruising. The film was produced and distributed by Universal Pictures. It took 28 days to shoot, and it cost about $777,000. It made over $140 million at the box office.
And this gave him the ability to fund future film projects, too.
Meanwhile, he was writing the galactic fairy tale inspired by Flash Gordon, Buck Rogers, The Odyssey, Beowulf, and The Legend of King Arthur, just to name a few. Lucas also researched Joseph Campbell, exploring the psychological underpinnings that tied all mythology together. In 1973, he shopped around his vague 15-page treatment. It wasn't until he met Alan Ladd Jr., who was a producer at 20th Century Fox, who finally understood and respected Lucas's vision, so he happily invested in the project. Fun fact: while writing the script in 1974, Darth Vader had always been there, but the heroes took time to be fully realized.
How did my father die?
Darth Vader, who was a pupil of mine until he turned to evil. Vader was seduced by the dark side of the Force.
The concept of the Force had yet to be developed too. The difficulty with that was creating a quasi-religious concept, and then explaining how it works quickly without heavy exposition.
The Force?
And the Force is what gives the Jedi his power. It's an energy field created by all living things. It surrounds us and penetrates us. It binds the galaxy together.
The finished first draft took about a year for him to write. It was over 200 pages long because the story got away from him, as he likes to say in different interviews. He decided to only make the first act into a film, and eventually, later on, he would do the other ones. He hired conceptual design artist Ralph McQuarrie to create paintings of certain scenes from the screenplay to give the studio executives a better idea of his vision. In 1975, Lucas founded Industrial Light and Magic. John Dystra was the visual effects supervisor. Jim Gawley, Paul Hudson, and Lauren Peterson were model makers. They developed new technology to create the special effects. Lucas himself is credited for technological advances, like digital audio and editing. John Williams composed the score after winning an Oscar for Jaws.
However, this was before he did Jurassic Park.
Because Lucas thought the music would give the film an emotional anchor. The orchestral composition gives it a grander feel. It was recorded by the London Symphony Orchestra in 12 days. And it's the one thing that exceeded Lucas's expectations during production. The opening shot with the Star Destroyer is mind-blowing. It perfectly sets the tone for the epic scale of the movie. The world building is incredibly done the moment Act 1, Scene 1 starts. Immediately in the opening text, It declares, and I quote, "During the battle, rebel spies managed to steal secret plans for the Empire's ultimate weapon, the Death Star." This would eventually be featured in the film Rogue One. Just think about that. This film has spawned a total of 12 sequels, prequels, and spin-offs, along with various TV shows, including The Clone Wars, Rebels, and The Mandalorian. Plus, there's a long list of video games, too. It's the story of a farm boy, a criminal, a wizard, and a princess, who come together to save the galaxy. I love the theme of how strangers can come together when they share a common goal.
George Lucas has stated himself he spent 6 or 7 months casting the film, looking for both individual screen presence and chemistry between the actors. Lucas was reportedly impatient with the process of acting. He was notorious for the direction, faster, with more intensity.
No, I don't think he likes you at all. No, I don't like you either.
R2-D2 and C-3PO were the first characters introduced. The chemistry and the dynamic between the characters is amazing. R2 is a great comic foil to 3PO's more uptight demeanor. 3PO's more by the book, where R2 just kinda does what he wants. Kenny Baker was hired because the R2 costume was too heavy for a child actor. He had the imagination for the body language, and had experience in costumes of smaller statures. Anthony Daniels got the role of 3PO because of his slender build and training as a mime. These are just a few of the reasons why 3PO and R2 are perfectly relatable despite being androids.
These aren't the droids you're looking for.
Fun fact! This film also started the ongoing running gag of 3PO always getting broken. Do you know what makes R2-D2 so angry? People pushing his buttons, darling. Mark Hamill had the sincerity, innocence, intelligence, and integrity that Luke Skywalker needed. That scene with Luke staring at the double sunset on Tatooine, yearning for more from life, but not yet knowing his place in the galaxy, is iconic. It's such a relatable moment because we've all been there. I mean, come on, haven't you? No dialogue is needed to know exactly what he's thinking and feeling. Aw, poor Luke. At first, Harrison Ford wasn't allowed to audition after working with Lucas on American Graffiti, because Lucas was looking for younger, new faces. But Harrison Ford was asked to read lines with other actors for their auditions instead. He eventually did get the role of Han Solo because he gave the role the mercenary swagger, world weariness, charisma, and cynical edge necessary for the role. We first meet the character in the cantina scene, where he proudly declares,
Han Solo. I'm captain of the Millennium Falcon. You've never heard of the Millennium Falcon? It's the ship that made the Kessel Run in less than 12 parsecs.
which is later followed up on in the Han Solo solo film. Now that's just fun to say. After Luke struggles with using the Force for the first time, Han argues why he doesn't believe in the Force. It's an interesting quasi-religious debate.
Hokey religions and ancient weapons are no match for a good blaster at your side, kid.
You don't believe in the Force, do you?
Kid, I've flown from one side of this galaxy to the other. I've seen a lot of strange stuff, but I've never seen anything to make me believe there's one all-powerful force controlling everything. There's no mystical energy field controls my destiny. It's all a lot of simple tricks and nonsense.
He's more than just a criminal, too. He's got a fully developed story arc, changing from being selfish to becoming a team player.
Old debts I gotta pay off with this stuff. Even if I did, you don't think I'd be fool enough to stick around here, do you? What? Look out! You're all clear, kid. Now let's blow this thing and go home. Hey! I just knew it. Well, I was gonna let you get all the credit and take all the reward.
Hey, I think that was funny. Is it funny?
The Greedo scene excellently sets up how Han can't escape his past, when the bounty hunter proclaims that he was hired by Jabba the Hutt. This is later touched on in this film because of the updated version and Return of the Jedi. However, did Han or Greedo shoot first? I don't care what anyone says, or this version says. In my mind, Han always shot first. It's a small element, but it really adds to the character. It shows that Han is ruthless enough to do what he needs to do in order to get what he wants. He's a no-nonsense, cold-blooded space cowboy that can shoot from the hip at a moment's notice. The fact that he doesn't even need to aim shows how confident he is with his blaster, too. You gotta admire that. You may not recognize his face, but Peter Mayhew had the height to play Chewbacca, who's ironically, arguably, one of the most recognizable characters from the franchise. Here's a humorous anecdote about how his audition went for this film.
And George walked in with Gary behind him. So naturally, what did I do? I'm raised in England. As soon as someone comes in through the door, I stand up. George goes, virtually turned to Gary and said, I think we found him.
He might not have any dialogue, but that roar is almost as iconic as the line, "Let the Wookiee win." He's part of the wittiest conversations in the film, too.
As a droid, don't pull people's arms out of their sockets when they lose. Wookiees are known to do that.
I see your point, sir. I suggest a new strategy, R2. Let the Wookiee win.
Get in there, you big Cheerio! I don't care what you smell! Get in there, don't worry about it!
Carrie Fisher had the self-assurance and feistiness needed to play Princess Leia Organa. The character shows she's more than just a damsel in distress by being a true rebel from the start. If you think about it, her actions set the whole original trilogy in motion.
Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope.
I like how when she first sees Governor Tarkin, she lets him know she's not afraid to speak her mind.
Governor Tarkin, I should have expected to find you holding Vader's leash. I recognized your foul stench when I was brought on board.
The scene with the destruction of Alderaan is such a devastating moment because of the wide range of emotions she displays during the genocide. She goes from being an all-business, tight-lipped spy to being a vulnerable, scared woman, desperate to save her people. So it totally makes sense the way she steps up and helps everyone to safety by shooting her way into the garbage disposal to help escape the Death Star. It shows initiative, intuitiveness, and spunk.
What the hell are you doing?
Somebody has to save our skins. Into the garbage, flyboy.
Sir Alec Guinness was cast because Lucas wanted an established character actor with a sage-like presence. He picked him primarily because of his very strong performance in Bridge on the River Kwai from 1957. Promptly after his character Obi-Wan Kenobi is introduced, he mentions the Jedi, the Force, lightsabers, Darth Vader, and even the Clone Wars.
You fought in the Clone Wars? Yes. I was once a Jedi Knight, the same as your father. And he was a good friend.
What is it?
Your father's lightsaber. For over 1,000 generations, the Jedi Knights were the guardians of peace and justice in the Old Republic.
How did my father die?
A young Jedi named Darth Vader, who was a pupil of mine until he turned to evil. He betrayed and murdered your father. Vader was seduced by the dark side of the Force.
The Force?
The first lightsaber battle in the franchise is simple, but so effective, because the look Obi-Wan has on his face shows that he's at peace with what he's done. Now that Luke and Leia are together again, his purpose has been fulfilled. He also knows he's outmatched. Luke would have tried to save him, only to fail. Fun fact, lightsaber fights are inspired by fencing, broadsword, and Japanese swordplay.
If
you strike me down, I shall become more powerful than you can possibly imagine.
Darth Vader needed to be physically imposing, so champion bodybuilder David Prowse was chosen, but Lucas never planned on using his vocal performance. He wanted a more dark, more textured, intimidating voice. So he hired James Earl Jones. Vader's established as a formidable, domineering figure by how he treats his staff. When he's introduced, we see his attitude toward failure and the ways he punishes people. They're both funny, yet frightening. The line, "I find your lack of faith disturbing," is also iconic.
Into that ancient religion has not helped you conjure up the stolen data tapes, or given you clairvoyance enough to find the rebels' hidden fort.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
Peter Cushing was perfect for playing the evil chief administrator for the evil empire, Governor Tarkin. There's just something about that cold, calculated stare that he gives when he talks. And he's the only person in the Empire, aside from the Emperor, that can tell Vader what to do.
Enough of this. Vader, release him.
As you wish.
Tatooine is such a barren wasteland, it makes sense that Luke wants to leave the planet for good. I mean, come on, wouldn't you? I know I would too. It was filmed on location in Tunisia. The Sahara was hit with the first major rainfall in 50 years on the first day of shooting. Temperatures flared to over 100 degrees Fahrenheit on sunny days. So yeah, needless to say, the cast and crew struggled to stay on schedule from the start because of costume and prop malfunctions. Lucas was frustrated that the sets, props, and costumes didn't live up to his expectations. The cast and crew allegedly had a hard time taking the film seriously too, thinking that it was just a silly kids movie at the time. The cantina scene is another iconic scene because of the atmosphere of the music and the unique alien costume designs. It's also known for this iconic scene.
That guy deserved it, though. I don't like that guy.
He doesn't like you. I'm sorry. I don't like you either. Come, let me get you something.
Tatooine is also full of such unique, colorful aliens like the Jawas. They're both cute and creepy. The Tuscan Sand People and Banthas are so imaginative. There's a great jump scare with them too. The rest of filming was on a soundstage on location in London, England. Lucas had clashes with the cameramen. They disagreed about the style of work like lighting and camera placement. The first time the Death Star is shown in full view is an amazing piece of cinema. The pacing for the suspense is incredible. They don't even get to saving Princess Leia from the Death Star portion until about after an hour in. You don't realize that you're halfway through the film, because the story is so interesting. The characters' chemistry and comedic timing are undeniable.
Use the com link. Oh my, I forgot. I turned it off.
Get down all the garbage smashes on the detention level, will ya?
Listen to them. They're dying, R2. Curse my metal body. I wasn't fast enough. It's all my fault. My poor master.
The third act is one of the most epic space battle scenes put to film. This is what the film's been building up to. How to destroy the Death Star. Sound designer Ben Burtt spent a year collecting otherworldly noises to create the soundscape. The scene was modeled after a World War II film The Dam Busters from 1955. Lucas hired Paul Hirsch, Richard True, and his wife Marcia Lucas to edit the film in a way to give it the energy and pacing it sorely lacked.
Roger Ebert wrote in his book, The Great Movies, and I quote, "Like The Birth of a Nation and Citizen Kane, Star Wars was a tactical watershed that influenced many of the movies that came after." End quote. On the contrary, many other reviewers have criticized Star Wars for damaging Hollywood by diverting its attention away from sophisticated films like The Godfather and Taxi Driver and Annie Hall, and shift the focus more towards spectacle and infantile fantasy. What do you think? Leave comments below and we can talk about it. In its May 30th, 1977 issue, Time magazine named Star Wars the movie of the year. Each subsequent film has appeared on their cover ever since. In 1978, Star Wars won 7 Oscars, including Best Art Direction, Best Costume Design, Best Visual Effects, Best Film Editing, Best Music, Best Sound, and Best Special Sound Effects.
Why couldn't Luke Skywalker find love? Because he was looking in all the wrong places. Ho ho!
Real talk though, Star Wars is what inspired me to become a writer. It made me think of storytelling differently. Until then, I never really considered trilogies and that 3-part story structure. I never really considered mixing fantasy with space and stuff like that. I never really thought of storytelling the same way that I do now. It also inspired me to take a closer look at films. So in a way, it kind of inspired me to be a film critic too, because I didn't just watch Star Wars, I studied it. And my brothers and I, we didn't just watch Star Wars, we lived by the words. Like, may the force be with you. And so many other countless phrases. I just remember the first time my brother had mentioned it. I never had heard of it before. And then he stopped immediately. He's like, what? And then I remember we watched them together. It's my older brother, me, and my little brother. I was just so blown away, and it made me look at films completely differently. I started to wonder how they did things like that. It really inspired the movie magic idea that I never really grasped before, but I started to think about it more often than what I used to. I think what I love most about this story is how inspiring it is. Just the thought of the Jedi and the thought of the Force, but being able to just conquer anything that comes across your way and having that invincibleness to you. Yeah, there's just something about these characters that they're just so likable. That they're very relatable characters, and they're funny too, which helps the relatability. Is that a word? It is now. Eventually it became more than a movie. It became a way of life. It became a way of thinking, how am I going to tackle these obstacles that come in life? How am I going to be able to deal with these things that are going on? It's very inspirational. It makes you want to be better. It makes you want to do more. Why does Star Wars mean so much to me? Because who hasn't faced that primal fear of feeling lost in the galaxy and not knowing where you belong, and not knowing your place in life? That's a very universal thing that people feel. And then just to have these characters that you identify with, it can be very moving. It makes you feel like you can conquer anything, that you can be invincible. I've been able to use that to conquer a lot of my fears and a lot of the challenges growing up in life. It's such a simple concept, but it evolved into so much more because of how dense George Lucas made this first story that he eventually planned on finishing later. And you just can't top that. The ingenuity. The writing's not the best when it comes to the dialogue sometimes. But the ingenuity, the fact that he was able to do all this, that's the important thing about Star Wars too. Never give up hope. Don't know what life would be like if I gave up hope. That message of never giving up hope. That sense of adventure. The fact that anything's possible if you could put your mind to it. That classic hero story. that classic good versus evil. And it's done so well that it pretty much influenced pop culture as we know it. Like, he changed the world. Yeah, that's why I love Star Wars. My official grade for Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope, is large popcorn. I highly recommend this film.
Thanks for liking and subscribing. Bye bye for now. Meow, meow, meow. May the Force be with you.
And remember, in the beginning, Leia asked Obi-Wan for help because he was her only hope.
Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope.
After he passed away, she calls R2-D2 her only hope.
You must use the information in this R2 unit to help plan the attack. It's our only hope.
So, is Star Wars A New Hope named after R2-D2?
Now I am the master.
May the Force be with you. Did you know that I'm a film critic for HorrorBuzz.com? You can read my reviews on their website, and I make frequent appearances on their YouTube channel, HorrorBuzz Live, so I'll leave links below for that too. You should check it out when you get a chance.
Nothing's ever as it seems. My time is coming, it's too late now.